Check, check, mic check, looking good. Hello, and welcome to the Campfire at the end of the world. I kind of came up with this idea recently, or this way of contextualizing what the internet is and how it fits into our current civilization and possibly the future civilization or society that hopefully we're around to see and to experience. And I was thinking about this, and I kind of got to thinking how the internet, in a way, is kind of like a campfire, like ancient nomadic people, right? If I had a campfire, you can see it for a long way around. You can see the smoke coming up, or you can see, the fire at night, and it would attract people in. So you have to think like a campfire. When you light it, you don't know. Somebody might walk from like 3 miles away that you didn't even know was there and might walk up to your campfire. That's just a risk that you take, right? Anytime you put a signal into the world, you're risking not only allies walking up to your fire, but also enemies, right? You're signaling that you are there and that you are wanting to talk, in a sense, right? You're wanting to make contact. And so the internet, in a way, is one of these campfires. It's a meta campfire. It's on a different scale than a small ring stone structure, on the ground to contain the fire, but it is, in a sense, contained within the computer. It's contained within modems and the electrical grid. So, it's very fragile. I think that it can cause a lot of damage, but it can also heat you up if you're cold. So, welcome to the campfire. And I also don't think it's hyperbolic to say that we're at the end of the world, because there's a lot. I mean, the problem is I've been a conspiracy theorist probably my entire life. I'm a 90s baby, 90s child, and I was raised on conspiracy theories. And so I've, for a lot of time, kind of felt like this was the end of something, the end of, the world. And so I don't think that that's hyperbolic. However, I also would like to challenge my more westernized individuals, because when we see the end of something, when we think about the end of the world or the end of the apocalypse, we contextualize it as, death. And while I do agree with that, I do believe it's true, I think that it is interesting and would be interesting to incorporate the thoughts of the Mayans. And so 2012 was supposed to be the end of the world. It was supposed to be a cataclysm, or not a cataclysm, but a apocalypse. And the Mayans, I don't think, ever really thought that. I think that they had identified 2012 as a nexus point, or like a turning point, like a fulcrum, or something that altered the current path, the current trajectory. And one of the things that, I read this in a book a long time ago. I can't even remember what it was, but I was reading about Mayan civilization, and what they started to realize was that the Mayans had a different view of birth. They viewed birth as death, right? So they pictured the fetus inside the mother's womb, right? This fetus is completely attached to the mother. It gets its oxygen, its food, its warmth. It feels its mother giggling, it feels its mother relaxing or tensing up. Its entire existence is within the womb. And then one day it starts getting squeezed and pinched and pulled. The womb breaks, right? The baby is thrust into the world. And baby births are not, how would you say it? Routine, right? There's a lot that can go wrong. It can be very catastrophic, right? The mother could pass. The baby could die. It's like a very important spot to get through. Once you get through that, your chances of living a long time go up, both for the mother and for the baby, right? But explaining that to the fetus inside the womb would be difficult, right? To say it's going to seem like your entire world ending. It's going to be the most painful thing that you've ever experienced in your life. You're going to feel like you're being ripped apart. You're going to be cold. You're going to be hungry. It's going to be miserable. However, you're going to become a human, and then you get to live your life. And then that's great and terrible at the same time. You know, like sometimes it's great, sometimes it's terrible. Sometimes you're experiencing elation. Sometimes you're experiencing tragedy. All that to say that the end of one thing is the beginning of something else. And so hopefully we are progressing through the end of one control structure, and we are approaching the beginning of a new control structure. And that's what I'm really wanting to talk about today, is how do we progress past... Oh man, I don't know if I... Okay, so if you are just joining in, if you are new to the scene, the scene of conspiracy theories, welcome. I am sorry that you had to learn this way. But to sum it up, what we now know from, factual evidence, a lot of factual evidence, is that the most important people in our world, quote unquote, our world, are comprised and controlled by vampire, satanic, pedo, demon cultists. And we are quickly approaching a engineered event that many refer to as Armageddon. This event has been in the works for quite some time. They've been engineering this thing, and now we are, right there getting ready for it. It's easy, I think, to, when being approached by something like that, latch out for some sort of comfort or, something to console you with, right? I think a lot of justifications come out, and because the truth of the matter is that this is our system, and we are all complicit in this system. So all of this stuff, as it progresses and comes out, it's gonna decimate our system, which it should, right? A lot of the stuff that is coming out is so sickening, and to think that we as a collective consciousness have known that atrocities that are, highlighted in the Epstein files, but are also just indicated throughout all of human history. I mean, look at any of the colonialists or the, holy wars, all of the different atrocities that have been perpetrated by large-scale governmental agencies, often acting as if they are tied in with a cult and occultic practices. So, step one is we have to admit that we have a problem. We have to look at the status quo, look at what we have in some ways fought, in a lot of ways, sadly, died, had a lot of sacrifice in the name of getting us to this point. There's been a lot of sacrifice. But we have to admit that the status quo is not good. That where we're at, where we've found ourselves, is not sustainable, is not practical, and is only going to lead to collapse and utter decimation. We're talking about heading towards, the status quo. If the ship just stays on course, which in all likelihood, no matter what I or any of us, I'm talking about the normal plebs, do, the masters, the captain of the ship is going to steer us right into an iceberg, as if he's aiming directly for the iceberg, and instead of, slowing down and turning, they're speeding up and, holding true to the course. So, all of that to be said, this last week I've gotten hit with a lot of people. I've heard a lot of people talking about voting. I've heard a lot of people talking about get out and vote, make your voice heard. I think, at this point in the game, we can all admit that that's not the way that we're going to get out of this thing. Kids are going to be continually mistreated, and bombs are going to continue to drop. And if we vote for either party, I've always voted libertarian. I felt like that was the only way that my vote mattered, was if it was like in line with somebody that was saying, let's turn the machine off. I think Republican and Democrat, both, anybody who is looking to that to solve problems, is they're just feeding the machine. It's like they're saying, nope, let's just keep the machine running. And I think we just need to turn the machine off, So this whole week, people been hitting me up saying, or not hitting me up personally, I've been seeing people post about it. I've been seeing a lot of signs and stuff saying like, hey, let's get out and vote, make your voice heard. I've seen some of my friends on social media. They've been posting some candidates that they're excited about. That, their candidate is going on the Tonight Show. The thing is, if your candidate is going on the Tonight Show, that is not your candidate. That is not your candidate. That's the thing that they're wanting to shove down your throat. That's the thing that they're wanting to trick you into supporting, right? Because supporting the system is supporting a little part of the system is the same as supporting the whole system. I think in their minds, maybe. I think a portion of it is they need us to be complicit. They need to say like, look, they voted for it. Yeah, most Americans don't want to go to war with Iran, but hey, look, they voted for Donald Trump, so we're going, right? Most people don't want any of the stuff that the government is doing to happen. However, the government is legitimized because look at how many, even though they get a fraction of the vote, like even a fraction of the population even cares about the elections, but they use that to like lord over us and really like, both literally and figuratively shove stuff down our throats. And so the first step is admitting we have a problem. We have got to admit that we have a problem, that we have arrived at a point where the old system, the old mindset, what we even thought the system was, can't progress past this level, right? We're having to augment. We're having to change. We are in the process of waking up to the mechanisms of control that our overlords have used and are using to control us. So we are starting to understand that the rules that they operate off of are almost in direct violation to the rules that normal people operate off of. The things that they seek to do and that the things that they make each other do and that they watch each other do are things that are beyond really comprehension for like a normal person like me, I've been very lightly touching the Epstein files because I have a very vivid imagination, and I've also been in the fire service for coming up on 17 years or whatever, and so I've seen some shit. I've been around some stuff. I've experienced some stuff. I don't, the way they talk about it now and like mental health with PTSD or whatever. They talk about like there's a cup, and the cup eventually hits its like full point, and then you just can't put anything more in the cup, you know. And so I've kind of got a professional obligation to keep my cup fairly empty. So I haven't I haven't brought myself really to dig in more so than like the presentations I've watched and some of the reporting I've seen or read done on the Epstein files. And I'm trying to keep my, I don't want to get too involved because I know what's in there. It's the absolute worst things you can imagine are in there. If you can like imagine the worst Saw movie that you've ever seen, or like the worst horror movie, or the scariest thing you could ever imagine happening to you, that's what these people were doing to people, and to children and to kids. And it's it's one of those things where I don't think you should tread lightly. I've been very careful because, like I said, I'm pretty mad. Like, I've been on the conspiracy train for a long time. I've known a lot of this stuff was true. I've watched Whitney Webb. I've watched her on tons of podcasts, and I know, like, it's true. I mean, Epstein was as much of a creep as everybody says he was, and he had evidence that implicated our entire top tier of our society. All of these so-called this ruling class, this parasitic elite that have been running our country and our world into the ground, almost intentionally, as if intentionally. It seems like it was intentional. And they've been doing it for at least the last 27 years. They've been running it into the ground, and I think that the first step is we have to admit that our status quo, which is a lot of that has to do with our identity, right? The status quo we maintain around us has to do with our identity, and that's where it gets really dangerous, because in moments of stress, you try to find something to hold on to, and people are going to start trying to look for let's say it's a life raft, right? We're talking about the end of the world as a sinking ship. You start to look around and you start to say, like, who around me is good swimmers? Who around me has life jackets? Who around me has a boat, or who around me has one of these life rafts? Like, how do we navigate ourselves into a safer position? As a lot of these like control mechanisms and stuff start to shatter and break down. But anyway, so we've got to identify that the status quo has to change. And then we also got to start figuring out how we're going to get in a lifeboat and how we're going to survive this cataclysm, right? And that might be a physical, a literal, a spiritual, an emotional, right? So I'm making the argument. I have arrived at the conclusion a long time ago that we are in the middle of a psyop, right? Even the release of the Epstein files, these little like glimmers of disclosure that we get, I think most of them, they're all psyop. It's all controlled dissemination of very specific information and branding that they're giving us. And so the first thing that we have to do is like, okay, they control us. So what does control look like? Like, how am I making this claim, right, that we are controlled? And what I think control looks like is disease, right? So one of the large aspects, one of the leading things that contribute to actual EMS calls that I go on a regular basis is that people can't get up off the floor. People are overweight. Their joints are all broken up. They're all broken up. They're on tons of different medications, and they're decrepit. And they literally, even just something as simple as rolling over onto your knees and standing up, they can't do. And not only that, but there's also nobody in the house that can help them get up. So it's like levels of disease and also iterations. Like, so they're not all at stage 4, right? Some people are at stage 1 and 2 and 3 and whatever. However, I do know, like, we are very vulnerable as a society because we have so many individuals with serious health issues. And like I said, that's like the majority of the calls I go on. But the question is, how have we gotten here? Like, how do we live in a world where, what was that homegirl, the skier? Going blank on her name. But homegirl can, like, come back from having her knees blown up and reconstructive surgery, and she can ski down mountains. But we have other people that, they never recover. They're never able to rehab enough to regain simple, well, what I would say is simple, but maybe the word I'm looking for is like important life skills, right? Like the ability to stand up out of your bed, walk to the bathroom, go to the bathroom, stand up, walk back to your bed, and lay back down, right? Something as simple as that. There are countless amounts of Americans who our healthcare system isn't even making an effort to help them with that seemingly small task, right? Like, we are rotting as a people. The vast majority of us are in terrible health, and so that is one aspect of control. Another aspect of control is consumerism. If you are watching TV, or even whenever you're watching YouTube or Facebook, or anytime you're engaged with media, you are being pumped full of advertisements. And these advertisements are scientifically designed to identify a problem in you and convince you that that problem that they have now shown you exists, that the fix to that is you buying their thing, right? So they actually benefit. Advertisement is based in showing you that you have a need, that you are incomplete. And I think, you see it everywhere around, right? How all these people are so concerned with how they look, with what kind of cars they drive, with how nice everything is, how everything looks pretty on the surface. And I think, we've in a lot of ways neglected the core in a way that, for instance, I do believe that everybody has a right to pursue the best version of themselves, but who gets to define what the best version of you is? Does an advertising company get to define what the best version of you is? Or do you define what the best version of you is? Like, for instance, it's never even entered my mind that a better version of me has Botox in my face, right? Like, I don't look in the mirror and think, man, my friends would really like me more if I had Botox in my face. And the main reason is because the friends that I have around me don't care if I have Botox in my face. So why would I strive for that, right? So you got to be very careful with, like, the messaging that you're ingesting, the people that are around you, and the messaging that everything is being pumped into us. The consumeristic, like, you always need a newer car. You always need it. It doesn't matter if your car's still good. You always need a newer car. It always has these new flashy gizmos and gadgets. It's the same thing. It's the same car. In a lot of ways, it's a worse car. I would say that the new cars, one of the things is they do make new iterations to the safety factor, and like a lot of these new cars are extremely safe, but that's not what they're selling you on. They're selling you on the bigger TV in the middle, or the status that you're going to receive whenever somebody notices that you're in a fancy car or whatever. So anyway, I think we should also use a metric of mental illness. to measure if our society is controlled and if we're being steered over a cliff or towards salvation. Suicide's up. Aimlessness is up. People don't even know what they're interested in anymore. People don't have hobbies. People don't do things just for fun. Everything's centered around making a frickin' buck. And I think the reason that we're all centered around making a frickin' buck is because of the artificial scarcity created by our monetary system, which is another thing that we need to address. But divorce rates are like through the frickin' roof. Like, most people that I know, even my friends that I would say I would classify as like happily married, have a divorce in the marriage. You know, like most people were like, oh, well, I was previously with this other person, then I got divorced, and now I'm with the person that I actually like. But it's just crazy to me that our divorce rate is just through the roof and so high. And that's sad to me, because anytime that there's a divorce, the thing is, the most important relationships you could have in the development of yourself is your family. The people that are with you through thick and thin, right? And anytime that fractures, now you've got these other commitments, you got these other directions that you're going, and it's not just that one, so I do think that is a way that, I think that's is devastating to what our, current state is. But then we got abortion, of course. But if the way that these things are mechanized or weaponized, I would say, is through artificial scarcity. We're told that there's not enough. We're told that they're going to have to charge us more because there's just not enough, and that, in some regards they're going to be correct. But we as a country have always wasted almost as much food as we've consumed. The amount of money, the amount of food that we throw out could feed the entire world. We produce more power than ever in human history, and they're proposing new data centers that are going to consume magnitudes more power. So why do we live in this world of scarcity if we have all of this ability? These are all, in my opinion, engineered into our system to begin with. So, next time that you think that you're free, just imagine if they want to put a power line over your property for a data center, or they want to put a data center in your backyard. How free do you think that you are to get to say no to that? How free are you if they just want to drop a pipeline straight through your house, and they just have to demolish your house? How free do you think you are to say no to that? So anyway, I don't necessarily want everybody to jump down every single conspiracy rabbit hole that comes their way, and inherently from here on out we're going to have to be very careful. Anytime you're consuming data or media, you have to question the source of where it's coming from and why you are receiving it when you're receiving it. It's a lot better to be conscientious of what you're consuming, meaning follow specific channels, investigate specific individuals, don't just doom scroll, buy books, research through books, and really we've got to become educated. We've outsourced as a civilization. We've outsourced into the hands of specialists a lot of our fundamental function of our society. So, meaning our economic system, our food system, our pharmacy, our physical fitness, even down to like our spare time and our board time. We sell that to the cell phone, right? Like, we pick up our cell phone and we doom scroll, and it's mining us for information that whole time. Information that it's going to turn around and sell and not give you a penny for, but it is going to do that. And so, we're waking up. I feel like we're waking up in a prison, or I feel like I've woken up in a prison, right? And I have to figure out, how do you navigate out of this prison, right? And so I used earlier the example of Neo. I think another good example is Truman from the Truman Show, right? When you wake up and you realize you're in the middle of this charade, how do you get out if the entire thing is reliant on you being in the middle of it? And so I think that the only solution that we can really propose or really engage with is just walking away from it, walking away from the system. No, we don't. We don't consent to being in the system anymore. We don't consent to child trafficking, and we don't consent to child sacrifice and all of these crazy things that these elites are doing. We don't consent to it. We don't want to play anymore. We don't want to play their game. We don't want to play the climb your way to the top and get as much as you can so that you can then have a little empire or whatever. We have to walk away from all that. And I think one of the things that I've been really struggling with recently, especially struggling with how to present it or how to communicate it, is because some of it is hard, right? But now we do have an option of staying in the status quo. That is an option to a degree, right? I mean, eventually the status quo is going to morph over time to where eventually you find yourself in a Ready Player One hellscape dystopia where all you have is inside your VR goggles. And if I'm inside my VR goggles, I have a sword of Excalibur. If I'm outside, I'm just eating tubes of meat, eating slop. So I think the status quo, I'm not okay with the status quo. I'm going away from the status quo. And so that means you have to walk away. And this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I'm struggling with communicating, because it's difficult even for me. It's difficult, even though I'm wanting to do it. It's difficult for me. But you have to walk away from a lot of your identities that you have, really invested in and really spent a lot of time believing you were, right? So, for instance, let's say I own a really nice car, and everybody walks up to me and they say, "Man, that is a special car. That is a nice car." And then whenever my friends talk about me and I'm not there, what they usually say is, "Oh man, have you seen his car? It's an amazing car. It's a really nice car. If you ever meet this guy, you're going to want to see his car," right? And so I'm invested in this car being really nice, and everybody would be really disappointed if I showed up and I said, "Oh yeah, I know that car. I sold that car. I now drive this Mazda RAV5. It's not a nice car." And all of the identity and all of the wealth and all of the stake that I had in everybody thinking that I had a really nice car would just evaporate. Now people, whenever they talked about me behind my back, what would they talk about? Would they say Dexter's poor? Or what direction would that go? If they can no longer talk about me having this nice car, And so some of this that it's going to be very difficult, but we're gonna have to learn to walk away from certain titles. So the other day, I've been doing some rage baiting on the internet. I'm gonna stop doing this because it's not constructive, but it's good whenever you don't know how to express yourself and you're just trying to lash out at the universe. Throwing a little rage bait out there on the old CIA sponsored Facebook site is kind of fun, but it helps me get a little vibe because I got a lot of comments and a lot of people commented back And anyway, on one of the various posts, an individual commented in and said, "Hey, I'm really struggling with trying to figure out what to do, what's next to do, because if I go out and protest, then people are going to say, oh no, you're just a white nationalist Christian, you know, and they would like dismiss his participation in the game, you know, and I thought that was really interesting because that is one of the things we're going to have to let go. We're going to have to let go of our own titles, even to the point of where if I'm defining myself, right, if like that hurts my feelings, if somebody comes at me with that saying, well, I might have to defend myself if I believe that that is my identity. But I think in the coming, I don't want to talk on decades, because I think decades right now, like what a decade used to represent, is very different than what a decade represents in the development of humanity now, But so within the next couple of years, within the next couple of months, we're going to have to get very flexible with how we define ourselves. This meaning, something popped up on my screen. Go and click it. And I think that the only way that we can do that is through education. So we're really going to have to start asking some hard questions about our own identities. I think the hard thing is even like, the Christian identity, the Muslim identity, the Jewish identity. If like you come up to me and the first thing that I define myself as is blank, right? You're gonna have to sharpen up on what that is and what that even means, right? Because I think it's different whenever you start to be educated on a lot of these things. You realize who the enemy is, who the captured individuals are, and what the rules are. And we're currently in a situation where we silo ourselves. So we are not able to work together. We're not able to work through different groups because we have a preconceived notion about who we are and how we define ourselves. A good example of this is like the Bloods and the Crips, right? A Compton gang. I'm referring to the Compton gang from like the 90s, that are in the movies, right? The predictive programming that I received as a child. That's what I'm referring to. But it was always like you got this gang that's in this little city. I say little city, big city, but they are battling each other when in reality they should be united against something else. It all depends on where you draw your lines and how you define who is them and who is us. And I've been bad recently because I like to draw lines. I've always kind of been a little bit of a contrarian, and so like I used to always joke like to an atheist I'm a Bible thumper, and to a Bible thumper I'm an atheist, right? Like they never can tell where I'm at because most of the time I won't ever say something I don't believe. However, I almost disagree with what either people are saying because context really matters. And you have to know your context. You have to be able to speak into your context and understand your context. And if somebody else is defining that context for you and defining your identity, that's no good. So that's one thing that I think people need to start preparing themselves for. Like for instance, this is going to be a hard one. This is going to get me in some hot water, but like the argument over the Super Bowl halftime show, right? The argument should have been, you're watching football? Not, are you watching the halftime show? Why are you watching football at all? Why are you watching mainstream media at all? Why are you giving them a dime of our money? Like, why are we investing in professional sports and in all these advertisings and big pharma and big food and big whatever? Why? Why do we just insist on plugging right into the prescribed holidays, right? Here is your holiday, celebrate this holiday. Here is your this day, here is this day. They're telling us. They're telling us what to think, they're telling us what to believe. And they're dictating, our culture. They're dictating what it is we think without even having to tell us. And so the fact that we're arguing over the halftime show just shows how far off the mark we are currently. Like, we need to be saying, you're watching football? Do you know the connections of that organization? I'm not super well researched on that, so I'm not like actually. That's more of just an example. I don't necessarily have facts on that, but if somebody does have some facts on that, I am pretty sure that a lot of the owners were connected into the Epstein files. And I, just based off of my natural hunch, I would say, oh yeah, so for sure, the NFL is wrapped up in a lot of that kind of crazy stuff, just because by the nature of big business, right? If you're running any sort of business that has billions of dollars flowing through it, it had to have gotten messy, right? Because these scumbags don't let money flow that way through different things unless they're compromised. The only way to get money flowing like that is you have to compromise first. And I think that that's going to be hard for normal people to understand. Maybe easier for others, right? Or maybe easier for some than others. But, whenever you come to the realization or the conclusion that it's worse than your wildest dreams and that they're planning on destroying everything, whenever you realize that, it kind of becomes a little bit more of a pressing issue. It's one of those things where I think we need to start having these conversations, and we need to start genuinely stepping away, building our own systems. This is where I think communication systems, I think we need to be researching heavily into like mesh networks. We need to be switching over to radio communications. We need to be figuring out alternative sources of energy. So solar needs to be, we need to start integrating solar and renewables in the sense of like a gasifier, to where you can actually run a generator off of wood. We need to learn how to actually build our own generators even, right? Like, we've outsourced all of this knowledge and all of this ability to specialists. And we say, okay, we're going to get really good at this one little bitty thing, and we've outsourced all of our knowledge for everything that goes into actually just living a life, not plotting for world domination and control of everybody else, but just like literally just running some chickens and a garden and a couple of head of cattle or whatever, to try to regain some of your own food sovereignty or whatever. And so, I, more than anything, like I said, this episode is a step one. This is admitting we have a problem. I think that there's a lot of interesting ways that we can go about solving some of these problems, but we all have to unite. I say we. And now, granted, if any of these elites want to, like, revoke their membership in their club, then they can come and be a member. Well, depending on past inequities, but that you got to keep it within within understanding here. But anybody can. We need to unite. We need to unite as humanity and we need to actually start acknowledging and determining what is humanity, right? I used to always compare it to like a music festival. We went to Austin City Limits. This was a lot of years ago now. And we were walking around, and there was like no fights. And everybody, there was people that would, bump into each other, and then they'd start to laugh. And it was a huge crowd, huge amounts of people. And everybody was just kind of doing their own thing, man. Like, nobody was tripping. Nobody was trying to freaking control everybody else, It's like, I think that humanity has been for so long propagandized that we're Hobbesian by nature, and that if left to our own devices, we would eat each other. When in reality, I think when left to our own devices, like, we make cool shit, like we make music, and we make, farms, and I think we make dance halls, and I think when left to our own devices, we actually do pretty good, and could do a lot better, especially if we weren't artificially suppressed by the deep state. Speaking specifically here about Bob Greenyer and the Martin Fleshman Memorial Project, I do believe that there is an alternative source of energy that lays just beyond our reality in an alternate dimension, and that we can actually suck it into our reality through devices that, Nikolai Tesla had originally made, and I think a lot of people have already copied it, and they're being able to show this stuff experimentally. And if Ashton Forbes is correct about the MH370 videos, then the deep state already has the ability to teleport freaking airplanes and shit. And so I think really we got some stuff that we need to start considering and start taking into account, right? But all that to say, the first step is we've got to unplug from the feed, right? We have to take back sovereignty. We have to regain control of our own humanity, our own brains. And I think a portion of that is just taking step one, admitting we have a problem. If you have not looked into the Epstein files, if you don't think it's that big of a deal, if you think your team isn't implicated, just take a little bit of time and go dig through those files. Go do a little research, read a little reporting. Your guy is implicated just as much as anybody's. If it is somebody that could be your guy, right? If they're on the tier of president, they're all compromised, dude. They're all. We have got to. It's not something that's easy to come to terms with, because even as I'm sitting here saying this, I understand that, like, I believe these mechanisms are real, and they really do make people like disappear and shit. And so, like I said at the beginning, welcome to the campfire at the end of the world, right? Like, this is my signal. Like, I'm kind of putting out a signal. I'm hoping to attract some allies, but I also know it's going to attract some enemies as well. So hopefully my campfire ends up turning out to be a party, and a lot of people show up, and we kind of create a. I believe, just like the Mayans, that at the end of destruction lies the beginning of something new. And at the death of one world, there's the birth of a new world. And, humanity's had a lot of goes at it. Maybe this is just one more go. Maybe we don't even get a chance, right? Maybe we already wasted our chance. But, hopefully you will join me. I'm going to start a Discord. I'll have the link down in the episode notes here. It's just going to basically be it's going to be called the Panhandle Primate Discord, and we're going to go over everything, and hopefully you'll be able to jump in there. I'm going to have a book section. I'm going to have a communication section. I'm going to have a alternative fuels section. I think that'll be a fun One, because, hey, dude, do you know anything about building a circuit? Do you know anything about building a motor? I don't really know that much, and so I'm hoping it will be a spot where people can come together and maybe we can actually start doing projects as a community, or even, as individuals in community, right? So I saw the other day on, Facebook, this guy was building, he built a light, or it was just a motor, but it had magnets, and he had bigger magnets, and he had his coils, and he had it all plugged in to be a circuit, and he spun the middle, and it started spinning, and it produced enough power to light a light bulb, right? Maybe we can start doing little, projects with our kids where we build our own lamps. We start figuring out, like, what does looking away from the power grid, because they're about to take it all, dude. They're going to take all the power. They're going to pump all the power into these data centers, and it's like the second you start using power, your account, whatever kind of an account, CBDC bullshit that they give us, is going to slowly tick down. Every minute you're on the internet, every minute you're using power, you're going to be losing credits. And they're going to throttle our time. They're going to give us fuel, right? The fuel to get on the internet is going to be a limited resource. You're going to have to, pay for it. It's not going to be free like we're used to it being, or as free as it used to be, even though they were stealing our data and mining it. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this. I'm going to try to cut this up and put it out in some little, snippets, but I've got to start speaking. I've got to start communicating and really expressing myself, because I'm going crazy. Like, I'm so mad and scared and disillusioned and inspired all at the same time. I have to get some stuff out, and I'm hoping to make some contacts. Like I said, I'm going to start calling these like campfire talks, basically, where the idea is I'm putting out a signal, and I'm hoping to receive some signal back, and maybe we can start building some community, some communities, and start exploring some ideas that maybe lead to an exit strategy, one of these lifeboats, one of these safety jackets, so that whenever the boat sinks, maybe we can survive floating around, and maybe somebody can come and rescue us, So get out there, read some good books, get some good exercise in, drink some good water, do some research, love on people. If you don't have anybody to love on, get out there and try to make some friends, because I'm telling you, there's a lot of loneliness in the world, and the only way to solve loneliness is to get two people together, So let's start talking, So anyway, thank you for joining me today, and until next time, peace.